What is going on, guys? I'm gonna be reviewing these Vulken straps, which primarily are kind of sold on Amazon for their use with Olympic rings. But I know a lot of you guys use these things for isometrics. That's specifically what I'm gonna be talking about, is basically using them with a foot plate. I'll be talking a lot about the Clench Footplate because it's extremely versatile, but I'll mention some other very low budget options as well. And if you guys saw my previous video when I reviewed the IsoMax, I'll probably refer to that video a few times in this video. Definitely recommend you guys checking that out for some context. Odds are if you click on this video, you probably have already seen that or know what I'm getting into. I'll be reviewing the IsoChain in the future because in that IsoMax video, I talked about how I wanted to exchange it for the IsoChain, which is actually a cheaper product for a number of reasons. I'll get into that in the future, but I will be talking about the IsoChain a little bit. So if you're looking at either picking up an IsoMax, IsoChain, or just building your own isometric system using straps instead of chains, that's what I'll be more or less be talking about in this video. So if you guys do want to pick up these straps and anything else I refer to in this video, I will link it down below in the description box. Greatly helps support me and the channel, and I think I even have a couple of promo codes in there as well that might save you guys some money. This thing is pretty affordable in my opinion, given how strong and durable it is and the great reviews I've been hearing about it. This thing goes for $29.99 for a pair. For some reason I thought I was only getting one strap, probably because I was thinking about just the IsoMax strap. So it was cool when I saw two of these because it's definitely opened up a number of doors, just further increasing their versatility and use. You guys could use these things. Again, I'm not going to review their use in gymnastics rings, although I definitely can see them being highly functional in that regard. So I probably will break out my old gymnastics rings and try those out in probably some future subsequent workouts and videos. But now might be a good time to give you guys a little bit of context on how I even found these and wanted to pick these up. I reviewed the IsoMax product, which is an isometric tool with a foot plate, and it's kind of an upgrade from the IsoChain using this. This is the IsoChain bar. Gives you guys an ergometer bar, which gives you guys a readout, which the main kind of selling point, the main value of that product goes into just the technology in here. Gives you guys some good metrics on what your force you're exerting on the foot plate and against the bar. Helps make isometric exercise a little more progressive, a little more fun and interesting. That's really the selling point of this versus just kind of DIYing your own kind of setup. And a lot of people in the comment section were saying that, like, this seems like a really overpriced product. Why don't you just get some chains, make your own foot plate or board and kind of call it a day? And I highly agree. But then I guess the big thing, like I said, is if you want those metrics, that's what you're kind of paying for. The IsoMax, as I said in that review, is really an upgrade because you had this strap versus the chain and the IsoChain, and you had a foot plate. Now, when you get up close and personal with these things, you can see these things are definitely very high quality. They're almost indistinguishable between the IsoMax straps. They're a little different. I would say the distance is a little bit further, it seems like it, with these Vulken straps versus the IsoMaxes. They have two carabiners on each side. One thing I don't like with the carabiners is they kind of don't open as much. I mean, they functionally open for what they need to do between each strap, but that's, I would say, one minor con. Otherwise, I think they feel pretty much almost the same, if not identical, to the IsoMax straps. The problems that I kind of saw, and that kind of irrelevant to this review, is that one, I said, once I saw this, I'm like, if you have the IsoChain, why don't you just get this strap and call it a day? You got this bar, it does the same function. Actually, this bar is a little better. You can stay tuned for my IsoChain review of why I think that's the case, but that's just a little side note. But even if you didn't want to do any of that and you just want to make something really low budget, you could just use these and instead of a chain. But then the other thing is just the actual foot plate on the IsoMax. I don't like the foot plate as much because it's kind of narrow in my opinion. It's definitely a good functional foot plate, especially for things like using it for resistance bands. I did a bunch of videos talking about resistance bands, X3 type foot plate, board, bar setups, which I'm gonna keep talking about because I love doing that. So you can always DIY your own foot plate, but I thought that foot plate was kind of small, and I didn't like how the force was so centralized in the way it's kind of shaped, almost like this kind of little figure eight kind of type of pattern. And when I got the straps, I immediately started thinking about the Clench Footplate, and I do have a promo code down below, shameless plug if you guys want to save 15%. Now this thing is expensive. I say it is the Biff Tannen hoverboard, Mad Dog hoverboard of foot plates because it is so beefy and huge and it's very durable. You're not feeling any flex at all whatsoever. This thing is expensive, but it's kind of heavy, so I think with the 50% code, it saves you 40 bucks. It comes out to maybe like 240. That might not be worth it to you. It has a bunch of channels, extremely functional, but the main thing I want to say about this or some other foot plates similar is all the different ways you can attach these straps to further increase the versatility and different isometric moves you guys can do. So depending on the bar you want to use, if you want to go super cheap, or just rig something kind of similar to this, you guys now can use two channels on each side on like this Instar bar. Granted, I don't know if I'd really trust these as much, putting a lot of tension through them, but people do say a lot of good things about this bar. You can loop it around the side and not even worry about the hooks. That's another option you can do. This is probably it's a cheap, relatively cheap bar, but I use this thing for kind of a lot of different functions. So even though it definitely gets its use, I'll link this bar down below if you guys are curious, but a simple bar, honest, would work as well. You could just loop it around both sides. And then getting back to the Clench Footplate, there's so many different options of ways you guys can put this through. I can loop it down the center and just have a center channel coming up like the IsoMax. But the thing I like the most about it are these channels right here, because in the IsoChain, right away when I got this, I noticed, and I'll give you guys an up close shot of this, it's not directly centered. And I kind of like that, because when I'm doing things like overhead tricep extensions or anything where the chain or the strap's going over my back, with the strap, I kind of felt that kind of like touching me really close because it was so centralized. Now I feel like that tension is more direct, and I think it's probably a better way of diverting that tension. So when I go behind the back on the IsoChain, I really like that. I also like the wider foot plate. And then when you go to the Clench Footplate, it's also equally wide. It can handle a lot of force. This thing does not budge at all when I'm pulling it. Unlike the IsoMax, I feel like it really kind of, you can feel that plastic move. This thing bends a little bit, but the advantage of this is it's just so low to the ground, you don't feel like that movement's really a big deal because you're so close to the ground, which actually is a really cool selling point of this thing. But going back to the Clench Footplate, what I like about it is if I channel it in the front or the back, it makes certain lifts a little more unique and specific. So I can channel it in the front and back and put forth full effort, say in a tricep extension, and this thing's not moving, and it feels a lot more comfortable compared to just more of a centralized channel coming right down the center. Now, the big reason people like that IsoMax and the whole strap system, if it isn't too obvious, is because it is so quiet. It's much more versatile than lugging around kind of heavy chains, and you got these little numbers, you don't have to keep counting the chains. I still said I kind of like the clanging of chains. I still got to kind of number mine, so I'll probably do that in the future. But I do kind of like this spring. Now, they say that this spring has a functional, I said it's somewhat theoretical, kind of function to it, where the more when you're kind of pulling on this spring, that a little give kind of tricks your central nervous system to exert more force, because it feels like maybe you can overcome that. And then people said, well, the actual strap functionally does that kind of as well as a slight give. I don't know, I think there's something too about pulling with this string, but that could just be a minor preference. I might just like the heavy kind of feel and clanging of the chains, but that might get annoying, so I don't know. But that is one thing with the bands versus chains, just kind of how they differently kind of feel with each other. My argument in the IsoMax video is that if you had an IsoChain, it just makes, to me, really easy sense to just keep this bar function. This is what you're paying for, and upgrade to these straps. You could get another base plate, build your own base plate to make it cheaper. If you're looking at all this stuff and you're like, you know what, I don't think I'm really gonna use this. I don't care about tracking the metrics. I'm just gonna try and go hard or count in my head, whatever. I don't need this bar. You can make your own relatively easy, cheap setup, like a lot of you guys were saying, with these straps, and make your own kind of base plate. I didn't even try it, but I feel like you could use like the stepper. I reviewed that stepper when I did like the band setup. I don't think it feels good with resistance bands, but I feel like a basic stepper would probably suffice. If I had to take a wild guess, if like that would be fine if you just wrapped it on the bottom. If you knew someone like I do, like Mac, who makes high quality little stuff, you spend a lot of time in the foot plate, shameless plug. I mean, I made my own kind of DIY board, but you guys can make your own cheap DIY board. You probably don't need anything that's really that high tech to do what we're kind of doing here. So I'd also say there's a lot of people who don't even use a foot plate, they just use their feet. So that kind of goes without saying. You probably don't even necessarily need a foot plate. All you need maybe some handles, a simple bar rigging, and these straps, and you should be good to go. But that's really it, guys. Any questions, definitely comments. I'm sure a lot of you guys, especially more versed in isometrics than me, have a lot of points you could say to this. Definitely open to kind of hearing those, just as one man's kind of first impressions and opinions, kind of looking from the outside, just getting into it. But otherwise, these are great straps, great value, a lot of functional uses outside of isometrics, so maybe consider that as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Look forward to that IsoChain video. That'll be coming up next.